It isn't just the Israel in the eye of the storm. The idea really of the title tonight was Israel, the sign of the times. Because Israel, of course, is at the centre of our world attention. And what I want to do with you is run through some of those countries which are mentioned in Bible prophecy in relation to Israel as it is at the present time. And it's quite fascinating as we see what is written in Bible prophecy being fulfilled. And we know we're definitely in the last days. Now, with this Shlomo Cohen slide, which is up here, he, of course, is a rather remarkable Israeli cartoonist. I like his cartoons. And this one I thought was so appropriate. The world, as it says, shall reel to and fro like a drunkard. And that's in Isaiah 24, verse 20. This is the world we're in today. Christ uses the word perplexity, meaning that there is no way out. The governments of the world just do not know what to do. But the whole world, we can see, is sinking into a deeper and deeper crisis. So we read there, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication, from Revelation 17, verse 2. This is not helping the matter, with wrong religious forces coming into play through the government, particularly of Europe. But we didn't read verse 28 of Daniel chapter 2. We started a little bit later. But this is very important, the passage which you see at the bottom of the screen. There is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh. Oh, I didn't notice that one. I always have one mistake just to see you're awake. All right? And maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Now, this is an amazing thing. It was revealed so long ago to Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, but we see it being fulfilled. And that is just incredible. All right, thank you. Look, the world, this is Israel's assessment. This is the first time Israel has done an international assessment of the state of the world. And the amazing thing is, well, I hope it will be when we get the slide back. It's up there. Good. Well, I haven't got it, but you have. Okay. The world is at a transition point analogous to being on the verge of a cliff, after which a series of crises striking simultaneously will reorder the planet's geopolitics, the place of technology, the economic order, and a variety of other disciplines, from health to energy, according to Israel's first government national intelligence estimate. And it goes on to mention other problems that are occurring in the world at the moment. Now, what I haven't got there is what is on the bottom of the screen. It was on my computer, but it doesn't seem to be on this one. The passage at the bottom. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. Yes? If I talk a bit, all right. Yes, look, when we look around the world, we've got problems in America. You've got problems in Britain, anti-Semitism, problems against democracy. You get the media opposed to the governments. There is so many demonstrations. The left is trying their hardest to bring Trump down. Even though he's no longer president, they're terrified he will be the next president. So they're making all kinds. They've been searching for years to get something on him. Exactly the same thing is happening in Israel. Netanyahu has become very unpopular by the left, but every time they've had an election, he comes out on top. But they don't want him. And I don't know what's going to happen here in Australia, but the left are feeling their power through demonstrations. They're attempting to bring down governments. Now, this is an absolute disaster in Israel. Israel is surrounded by enemies. They're threatening war, and yet for some reason the country is unmindful of what is actually going on. I think we'll just move on, Colin.
Can't get that extra bit. It's a different format, I suspect.
Righto. We'll just keep moving. Well, if you could move me, please. Right, now just a few slides about the situation in the US. Because under Biden, we can say the US is becoming US. So let's have the next slide, please. The conspiracy to shrink Israel. This is a general conspiracy around the world, including the United Nations. But you'll notice what it actually says here is, it is clear that the US, the EU, the European Union, and the Arab League are supporting the Palestine Liberation Authority in its efforts to cut Israel down to historical proportions. They're trying to take away the power and the place of Israel. So if we can move the next slide, please. Now, one of the things they don't like is the Israeli settlements in what they call the West Bank, but the Bible calls Judea and Samaria. The interesting thing is, you see, the New York Times bureau chiefs and columnists have been unrelenting in their criticism of settlers. Yet, ironically, it is the Palestinians who occupy Jewish land in biblical Judea and Samaria. And this is a major problem because they're moving Palestinians into land in Area C. Area C is allotted to Israel. They're moving Arabs in. Israel isn't, European Union is. But on the other hand, every time another settler goes, there is criticism of Israel, and they're demanding that the settlers not settle there. Thank you. Now, Biden, of course, as we know, is the... It's working. Oh, good. Thank you. Right. Back in action. Biden has spent $1 billion to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And look, terrorism takes money. You've got to have weapons, you've got to have armament, you've got the ammunition, and so on. It takes a lot of money. Trump stopped the money going to the PLO because of it's only going to pay terrorists and terrorism. Biden's sent $1 billion. Now that's more than you get on the pension. And the Israeli deaths rose by 900%. America is paying for the terrorism. Biden didn't, Trump didn't, but Biden is. And that's a terrible situation. Now, what else? In America, there is a parliament called the Taylor Force Act. Taylor was an American that was killed in a terrorism attack in Israel. The family, therefore, got this law through the American Parliament, that funding of terrorism should stop from Israel, and actually under the Act, any terrorist can be charged at law and made to pay compensation. Taylor was blown up in that bus, the picture there. But Biden is actually paying money against his own law. The new lawsuit challenges Biden administration to stop funding Palestinian terrorism under the Taylor Force Act. Is violating a federal law. But nobody's prepared to do anything about it. The opposition is complaining, but the Federal Bureau of Investigation will not do anything. Now, this is an interesting question. They've been pushing like mad all around the world for a two-state solution, even though the land is really historically Israel's. But you see, they're giving cheers and cash for terrorists. And what we read here, the Biden administration and leftist groups insist that Israel pave the way for Palestinian sovereignty. But broad support for anti-Jewish terrorism explains why it's a non-starter. While they've got terrorism and while they're pushing this, it went. While they're doing that, then there's going to be no two-state solution. So we'll move from America to the UK. Now, the UK does figure, of course, in Ezekiel 38 and in Isaiah 23. And it's an interesting situation that UK is in relation to Israel. What we read at the top there is Joe Biden, the President of America, has gravely insulted Britain. And that was over his visit to Ireland. And he's very much opposed to Britain and the Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom. But if we move on from there, let's say something about the United Kingdom, because it's a small island. And you might think it could have very little to do on a world scale, but it does. It's ranked 21st in the world by population, less than 1% of the world population. But it punches above her weight. You see, number 5, Britain is number 5 in the world gross domestic product rankings. There's USA, China, Japan, Germany, UK. So that moves her, despite a small population, into right the upper reaches of influence in the world. And furthermore, down the bottom here, only 3 countries are capable of global reach: US, UK and France, able to project power around the world. That's amazing, isn't it? UK, for all its, because it's a maritime nation and its history. So we look at the Commonwealth. Well, here's Australia and New Zealand. What you notice here, there's the red countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Britain, tucked away, that little island in the middle. But the blue colour there also illustrates countries that belong to the Commonwealth, 58 countries in the Commonwealth. It's a major force in the world, and the late Queen was instrumental not only in preserving the Commonwealth when Britain went into the European Union, but also enlarging it. And so it says here, roughly 90%, in UK 95%, of the world's goods are transported by sea. So sea is still the major trading route. And Britain is still the major trading, seagoing merchant power, often under flags of convenience, but still the British Navy. Now, this is a key because in Isaiah 23 we speak of Britain resuming trading on an international scale. What about this one? The UK Army abandons Canada base for Oman. The UK's major training base for her army and their forces was in Canada. They've realised they're never going to have a war with Canada. So they're moving it to Duma in, it's not the way they're spelt, it's the way I think they pronounce it, in Oman. And they say the reason why they're building this large naval, military, Air Force base in Oman is because it's in the Middle East, it's close to the entrance to the Persian Gulf, and they say because the next war will be centred in the Middle East, we'd better beware we can have some influence in it. And that's a key. You'll notice in the previous slide, not too many, the ring round the Indo-Pacific region. That is becoming the most significant region on a trading basis in the world. And countries like China and also Britain are trying to increase their trading in the Middle East. This is the rising trading area of the world. And Britain needs to be in position where with her latest naval ships. She's enlarging her navy with the Queen Elizabeth II, that's the large aircraft carrier and so on. They, from that base, can be more significant in that area. Now, Isaiah 23, as we said, it talks about Britain trading nationally round the world. And what we see here is that the UK joins the trading bloc, which now has 136 million more consumers than the European Union. On the left, you've got the red column, 582.5 million, compared to the European Union, 446.8 million. So it's better to be in the larger trading bloc. Now, at the bottom of it, it says it's the CPIPP. And if that's difficult, it's even more difficult if I tell you what the letters stand for, so I won't. Nobody will remember it. But it is a major trading bloc in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, this is fulfilling Bible prophecy, but it places Britain in the right place for Ezekiel 38. So it says, official, UK strikes the biggest deal since Brexit to join huge free trade bloc in the Indo-Pacific. And you can see by the flags, those part of the trading bloc and where it will lead Britain. You say, well, it's South America. Yes, but that also is on the Pacific, isn't it? And this is a major change, major development in the world, which is really going to help Britain grow and develop into a prosperous country, which Isaiah 23 says, but the money won't be for Britain, it will go to the Lord Jesus Christ when he comes. So what this is doing is building up for us the picture that we're getting closer and closer to Christ's appearing. Now, India's been a little bit difficult. India's part of the Commonwealth. India hasn't been involved to the same degree as the others. But here you see the UK invites India to join AUKUS agreement. AUKUS, Australia, United Kingdom and the United States. Now they want India in with the same agreement. This is the agreement which is not just for Australia to have nuclear-powered submarines, but it is also a defence and trading agreement. There's a lot more behind this than just atomic power submarines. So we read down the bottom here, and it shall come to pass after the end of My thumb's too big for the button. It shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, which in the latter days is not America. America's going down. It is still Britain. And she shall turn to her hire and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth, and her merchandise and her hire shall be wholeness to the Lord. So this is the way it's going. This is the way it's developing at the moment. And India is coming aboard. But what about Britain and Israel? After all, if Britain is going to stand up against Israel when Russia invades, Russia and Europe, what's Britain's position with Israel? Well, here, Minister Eli Cohen, Britain supports our fight against Iran. The Foreign Minister of Israel and his British counterpart sign a document that will anchor and deepen Israel-UK relations over the next 10 years. Now that's fascinating because it means Britain is courting Israel and trying to get closer to that nation. So we'll turn to Russia. Russia's Ezekiel 38, Daniel chapter 11 in the later verses. What can we say about the modern situation in Russia? Well, first of all, the West has finally realised there is a clear front in the battle for freedom. You've got USA versus Iran there. But it's not just that, you see. At the bottom it says, the Russia-Iran alliance has destroyed the West's illusions, and we must act accordingly. The Russia-Iran alliance, that's Ezekiel 38. And Iran, in reach of a week or two of atomic weapons, is really a power to be reckoned with. And now freedom is at risk. So, what about this new world order here? The Iran, Russia, China axis. I always used to think to myself, all nations gathered together to Jerusalem to battle. How do we get China there? China, look how China's developed. Developed a navy, her army, her air force, threatening countries like Australia. And now aligned with Russia, this is a very dangerous situation. The Iran-Russia-China axis during the Biden administration. Why does it say during the Biden administration? Because America has become so weak on the international scene. Internationally, she's considered a bit of a joke at the moment. That has given rise to Russia invading Ukraine, China threatening Taiwan, and a whole lot of other problems in the world, which it is thought would not have happened under Trump because he was a stronger character. And we read here, as Winston Churchill famously pointed out, I never worry about action, only about inaction. And that's where the weakness is arising. So the Biden administration's inaction has led to the creation of a new axis of tyrannies, Russia, China and Iran, with North Korea not far behind. Tehran Times, today we're witnessing the formation of a new world order. And they're threatening Israel. Right, there it is. Russia threatens Israel against arming Ukraine. The West has been pushing Israel to provide the Iron Dome and other weapons to help Ukraine in the war against Russia. Direct escalation if. This is Russia's warning. And so I have seen in the press from Israel that they're saying after Ukraine, we're next. And they're actually talking about Ezekiel 38 in Israel, with Russia invading them. So here's another one. You wouldn't believe this one, would you? Putin makes a pact with Palestine. Just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier in the Middle East for Israel, Russian President Vladimir Putin has offered direct military cooperation and assistance to the Palestinian Authority. Will Russia send troops to Israel's doorstep? Okay. This picture here, of course, is Putin makes a pact with Palestine. Look, Russia to strengthen military ties with Palestine. Do you think they're friends of Israel? Will Russia send troops to Israel's doorstep? Look, this is what's going to happen in Israel. We know Zechariah tells us that 2/3 will be killed. And it's too terrible to think about, really. I can see why, but it's terrible to think about. This is what Russia has been doing in Ukraine. But look, we think that expanding the Russian presence in Syria is a good thing. Al-Assad, president of Syria, in an interview published on Thursday, Russia's military presence in any country should not be based on anything temporary. Assad has invited the Russians to develop more military bases and send more military troops into Syria, right on Israel's border. Already they've got bases and more troops there possibly than, well, nearly as many as in Ukraine. And they're right, we always thought Russia would have to come all the way down from the north, but actually she's just over Israel's border in Syria. It's a frightening situation. Now, Iran, because Iran's mentioned in Ezekiel 38. Iran is moving towards a full defence partnership. It's Russia and Iran's relationship. And the passage, of course, down the bottom is Persia, which is Iran. Ethiopia and Libya with them, all of them. It's Ezekiel 38. And look, it's all taking shape. And Iran is becoming a very significant enemy dedicated to the destruction of Israel and joining up with Russia. What about this? Russia, as we know, has been trying to centrifuge uranium to get it concentrated enough for atomic weapons. And now, against all the laws, against the International Atomic Energy Authority, they've got uranium enrichment up to 84%. To have an atomic weapon, you need it to, anybody know? 92%. They're almost there. That can be there in a week. This is really threatening. So what is Israel going to do? Are they going to bomb it or not? So we've got here the Day of Judgment. Up here. Major Iranian attack is coming, warns Israeli export. Iran is about to launch a full-scale war of conquest against Israel. But we know it's Russia. But Iran's going to do it in a different way. Iran-led bloc senses opportunity to threaten Israeli life. Recent events in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Israel and the West Bank suggest that a concerted effort is underway by the Iran-led regional bloc to increase pressure on Israel. The evidence suggests the possibility that this may result in war. What war? Not perhaps Armageddon there, but another one. All signs point to imminent Israeli attack on Iran. Israel has been preaching a credible military threat against Iran for years. What's happening that makes now the time to act on that threat? Because they're getting close to atomic weapons. The strange thing is, at the same time, Biden is still trying to make a peace agreement with Iran. He's still offering them trillions of dollars if they don't develop an atomic weapon. He's desperate. It's making Israel getting desperate too. So what about the Arabs? The Palestinians cozy up to Putin. We're saying Putin says he's going to back the Arabs militarily. Now they're cozying up to Putin, saying they don't trust America. It says here, Russia stands by justice and international law, and that is enough for us, says the Palestinian leader. You think that's appropriate? Justice and international law, Russia? No wonder we started off with a drunk against a lamppost. What is happening here? Palestinians increase illegal construction in Judea and Samaria. And Israel has never stopped it. Though they're building in Area C, which is allotted under the peace agreement to Israel. The European Union have spent billions of dollars putting in roads into Judea and Samaria, into the area allotted to Israel, building villages and moving thousands upon thousands of Palestinians in. They're trying to take over Israeli land. And so far, no Israeli government has stopped it, even though it's illegal. As somebody said, could you imagine if Israel went to France or somewhere and started building villages without permission? What would they do? So, on the left there it says, but ye, O mountains of Israel, ye shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people of Israel, for they are at hand to come. But when we read the mountains of Israel, that's Judea and Samaria. And Ezekiel tells us that this area is going to be in the hands of Israel at the time of the end. So now we read, Netanyahu's the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu's new government to settle all biblical lands of Israel. They either move in or the land's gone. And yet the world is against them doing that. The Palestinians opposed a two-state solution. America and Europe are all pressing for a two-state solution, but the Palestinians don't want it. They've always rejected it when it's been offered. What they want is more anti-Israel terrorism. They are determined to destroy every last Jew in the area. It's funny that the world wants a two-state solution, which the Palestinians nor the Israelis want. So, analysis: Israel and the coming multi-front war with the Iranian Axis. Multi-front war? That sounds like Psalm 83. Yes, but it's not a direct war with Iran, it's with their proxies. Now here's Psalm 83 on the left. They have said, "Come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They're confederate against thee." Then it lists the nations who are contiguous with Israel, on the borders of Israel, who will be involved in the war of Psalm 83, which must be a prelude to Armageddon. It's not Armageddon. And they say, "Who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of God, pleasant places, pastures," that's the alternative to houses of God, an alternative translation, "in possession." So on the white slide there, this is coming, and this is a warning to Israel, which has been supplied to Israel by their intelligence somewhere, listing who will assault Israel. They've got, so Lebanon, Hezbollah and Hamas, the terrorist organisations, are now together in Lebanon with missiles and drones and so on. Syria, 17 combat units or militias positioned near the border with Israel. Iraq, dozens of militias armed with missiles and drones. Yemen, that's not mentioned in Psalm 83. Gaza is Hamas and Islamic Jihad with a massive missile stockpile capable of paralysing Israel's central region. But the interesting point is at the bottom. The source believes that Iran will not launch any attack from its own territory so as to avoid a direct Israel retaliation against Iran. That's Psalm 83. And the feeling is that it could happen this year. But anyway, I'm going to deflect now to Europe just for a moment and the United Nations. So, what we've got here. You would think, with the war going on in Ukraine, that Europe has more or less stopped importing liquid natural gas from Russia. And the truth is the opposite. You see what it says here? France now the world's biggest buyer of Russian natural gas, despite the Ukraine invasion. December last year, but that's not that far ago. European imports of Russian liquid natural gas are said to have increased by 40% this year during the invasion of Ukraine. France, already the main importer of Russian liquid natural gas in Europe, has become the world's leading importer of Putin's natural gas, beating even Japan in February and March. It comes as European imports are said to have increased by 40% this year. They're so reliant on Russia. In effect, what's it saying? It's saying that Europe is paying for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Between January and October, this is in 22, France imported 4.45 million tonnes of Russian liquid natural gas, an increase of 52% in 1 year. We know in Ezekiel 38 that Russia is going to be confederate with Russia in the invasion of Israel. They absolutely hate Israel, and they are so dependent upon their power supplies from Russia. It's fully understandable that they will go with Russia into Israel. Now this one, they're not going to read all this, but it'll blow like Vesuvius. You know Vesuvius, the volcano in Italy, and so on. €1 trillion debt, volcano. What it means is the debt which Germany will have to pay for if the different countries collapse under their debts. It's going to completely break the European financial system. The European single currency, whose fundamental flaw is leading to profound and growing imbalances in its 19 member countries, which include Germany, France, Italy and Greece. When you come to the debts, Germany is the biggest creditor, owed a massive 1.23 trillion euros, while Italy has a deficit of 670 billion euros, followed by Spain with 484 billion euros. Were the system to collapse, and here we are, were the system to collapse, the Bundesbank would lose billions of euros owed to it by other national central banks. And actually, Europe's on the verge of financial collapse. Britain got out just in time, really. That's what it amounts to. Now, what about the United Nations? Well, that's Europe too, really. Gives a human rights reward to a Palestinian terrorist who kills Israelis. And they give them human rights award to a terrorist. What kind of organisation is this for peace? Russia's United Nations Security Council role is a bad joke, says Ukraine. Do you realise that Russia took over the chairmanship of the United Nations Security Council on April the 1st? What's the good of a United Nations when the worst nation of the lot at war takes over the chairmanship, and the chairmanship controls the programme? It can stop anything that anybody else brings, says no, we're not having that, and it sets the programme itself. And Russia has set 3 items in the programme. The one that concerns us is the third item that they have set for the programme during their presidency, their chairmanship, is the Middle East. Okay? So we come down here. Russia has caused massive death, human suffering, destruction in Ukraine, and triggered global energy and food crisis. But in the long run, Russia itself is the biggest loser, inflicting enormous damage on its people and economy and setting its own development back decades. So you say, so Armageddon can't happen soon. Yes, it can. Brother Thomas in Elpis, Israel, wrote, "Let the Russian treasury be as empty as it is said to be, and its expenditure exceed its revenue by double the alleged deficit. It will only operate as a pressure from within, causing her autocrat to enter into the countries and to overflow and pass over, and to enrich himself with the spoil of those he is destined to subdue." When you haven't got money, what do? You take it off somebody else. Well, I'm not telling you to do that, but Russia, yeah. So, the United Nations threatens Israel over Palestine. Okay? And it says the World Court to take up Israeli occupation of Palestine. And they're looking at whether the Jews in the land are actually breaking the law. They seem to forget that it was the United Nations that set up the State of Israel in the land. And it is the Israeli land anyway. Now, this is fascinating to me. EU sources, anti-Israel measure tainted in wake of Qatar corruption scandal. What's this? The United Nations have got a panel to look at what they call the illegality of Israel in the land and to whether Israel should be taken out of the land. What has happened is Qatar on the Persian Gulf, which is very anti-Israel, has paid large sums of money to the chairperson of the council and to other members of the council so that they bring in it against Israel. So the council looking at this is totally corrupt. What they're saying now is, you've got to abandon the council because they're taking bribes. Well, we finally got to Israel, a bit later than I thought we would. But this is the sign of the times. The State of Israel was reborn in 1948. It's the last days, there's no question about that. Israel's there, isn't she? Now, what do we know about Israel? Israel has the fourth strongest military in the world. Would you believe that? It's not even twice the size, I don't think it's twice the size of the population of Sydney. Could you imagine Sydney being the fourth strongest military power in the world? This is amazing. It earns a top 10 ranking for most powerful nation. And I won't take you on down through this. Well, it's Israel's ranked number 10 in the list of most powerful nations, defined as those which consistently dominate news headlines, preoccupy policymakers and shape global economic patterns. The top winners were United States, China and Russia. Isn't that amazing? So it's worth going in to take a spoil. A land flowing with milk and honey? You look at that picture. Flowing with milk and honey? When Israel took the land it was, in Old Testament times, they brought some of the fruits of the land, didn't they, to show them? But when Israel is not in the land, it became barren. And it still is. I remember driving I was a passenger in a taxi, and I pointed out to Jeremy, who was with me, that side of the road is barren. This side of the road is fruitful, it's green, look beautiful. And the driver said, it's called the green line. That side is Arab, this side is the Jew. The land only prospers at Israel's hands. No other people have ever been able to make the land do what the Israelis have done with it. So a land flow and with milk and honey comes back to this. It's a land that is blessed when Israel is there. That's the key. It is not a land that God blesses when Israel is not there. Major offensive in Judea and Samaria may be necessary in 2023. They're going to have to do something about that area. A major offensive is described in in Psalm 83. And it's this year, they think. They've got to do something about the Judea and Samaria. And the government plan could see settlement population increase by hundreds of thousands. That's going to bring on war. And biblical history is repeating itself. Bennett warns of civil war. See, over the idea of reforming the rules concerning the High Court in Israel, which is not democratic, it appoints its own judges. It's left-wing and will only appoint left-wing judges. It has struck down something like 30 laws passed by the Knesset, and the High Court has said no. And they're not voted. That's not democracy. Those people going against it are getting violent now in their demonstrations, say it's the destruction of democracy. The government is there through democracy. The High Court is nothing to do with democracy. In fact, though Biden is against this law to bring the High Court under some control, what Israel is doing is making the rules about the High Court the same as America's. And the result of this demonstrations, and the opposition's actually calling for civil war. Surrounded by enemies, they're fighting amongst themselves. And what they're saying is, that happened each time Jerusalem fell in history. Certainly, in AD 70, when the Romans took it, they were more concerned about fighting amongst themselves than fighting off the Romans. It was the end of it. It's amazing. But why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? It's not that they're really against the reform of the High Court. Even the opposition knows that's necessary. It's because they want to take away the right-wing government. What they're against is religion. The right-wing government has orthodox membership in the Knesset. They want them out. They don't want Israel, the left wing don't want Israel to have a religious government and to promote a religious country. That's what they're against. And it's no wonder 2/3 will have to perish. Now, protests cost a lot of money. Do you know that each one who protests, they've found out is paid 250 shekels to protest? Did you know that they are paid 100 euros to bus it, and they're providing buses, to the protests? It's massive money. Who's paying it? The US is. America is. America does not stand with Israel at all. Britain does. And what the Islamic Jihad chief says, Israel has never been weaker. They're seeing it as time to invade Israel, as Psalm 83 says. And now the intelligence directorate in Israel sounds an alarm over eroding Israeli deterrence. They say that the IDF itself is weakening. Some are revolting against the government and refusing to follow their exercises. Israel is becoming wide open to invasion. Netanyahu has freezed the money to the Palestinian Authority. Well, why would Israel pay for terrorism? Will the Palestinian Authority collapse? This is another one who's going to be driven to war. Now, how about this? More than 90 countries in the United Nations call on Israel to restore the Palestine Authority terror funds. If there was terrorism all through Australia, would you expect the countries to tell the government in Canberra to pay for it? This is ridiculous. But you see, Jeremiah 30:14 says, all thy lovers have forgotten thee, because thy sins were increased. What the Knesset has done, they've passed a law to strip the citizenship of terrorists who live in Israel. Not only will they strip the citizenship, but that means they're then deported from Israel. They're going to have to go to another Arab country where they can't get to university, where they don't enjoy the highest standard of living, where they don't get employment, and when they're under the thumb of tyrannical governments. This one's fascinating. We always thought about Israel and oil, didn't we? Israel exports crude oil for the first time. Isn't that incredible? And the ship's gone to Europe with crude oil from Israel. You know, the story when I visited Israel 2 or 3 times was Moses spent 40 years searching the Middle East for the only country that didn't have oil. That's what they were saying. And now they've got it. That's another inducement. So where will it all end? We read from Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's image. And Russia has started the moves to build up its image empire. It's on the way now. We're leading to Armageddon, a heap of sheaves in a valley for judgment. And you see in this passage at the bottom left-hand corner, and in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. The stone cut out of the mountain, not in hands, which is the Hebrew, not in hands, meaning it's a divine power, not a human power. We're standing on the threshold of these events being fulfilled. Christ said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." This slide I've borrowed, and it says time is not on our side. Our master can come at any time. We're looking around at the ages of most of us here. Time is on our side. And we know we're going to see Christ very soon. But it is not a time for us to waste our opportunities. Taken quite a bit longer, unfortunately, than I intended. But I hope you found that an interesting roundup of the way people, the nations, are viewing Israel and moving against Israel. Israel is the sign of the time.